I learned how to play guitar 3 years ago when I was stuck in bed for 6 weeks in too much pain to move. That's when I met Bob. But before I can introduce you to Bob, I need to fill you in on how he was introduced to me. I was born on July 17th, 1999, on Long Island, New York. From what I've been told, I was a pretty cute, peaceful baby until I got colic and would scream for hours on end. One night, in an attempt to keep the tri-state area asleep, my mother put on the TV and came across Luciano Pavarotti singing opera, and immediately I stopped crying. As a control variable, she switched to the news, and lo and behold, I was crying again. So for as long as I can remember, music has really been a soothing force in my life. My life moved along pretty smoothly after that, up until 2 days after getting the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, or MMR for short. I started walking on my toes, flapping my hands, and banging my head on things. All babbling and speech came to a screeching halt. But with my family's help and early intervention home services, 3 days a week for 18 months, I graduated. Just in time to get the chickenpox vaccine and another reaction. Not too long after that reaction, I was diagnosed with insulin-dependent type 1 diabetes. But from what I've been told, I took it like a trooper. After getting my first shot in the hospital, I looked at my nurse and said, "Thank you." Now, throughout my life, there seems to be this wonderful, endless supply of dark, ironic humor cast upon me by who knows. I got out of the hospital, age 3, with type 1 diabetes the day before Halloween. So, instead of candy, my treats were alcohol preparation swabs and insulin and syringes, just everything a 3-year-old could possibly dream of, right? But my mom wanted to inspire me to believe that I could do anything. So we used to cut out little pictures of famous people with type 1 diabetes from the New York Times. Mike Piazza of the Mets, Patrick Ewing of the Knicks, Spider-Man. But shockingly, and I just learned this recently, Spider-Man, Mike Piazza, and Patrick Ewing don't actually have type 1 diabetes. But the trick worked. I grew up playing every sport I could get my hands on, and I was the lead in every play and musical that I tried out for. I was kind of fearless. I also began volunteering for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, or JDRF for short. I appeared in print and TV public service announcements. I was also lucky enough to appear on TV with actress and spokesperson Mary Tyler Moore. So, time marched on, as it does, and soon enough I was in 9th grade. That's when something different came along. That's when I met Bob. Meet Bob. Bob's pretty big, eh? So let's take a moment to put this all together. Colic, MMR vaccine reaction, chickenpox vaccine reaction, type 1 diabetes, and now Bob. What does it add up to? Well, my endocrinologist didn't know. My primary doctor didn't know. My dermatologist didn't know. And with every appointment, Bob kept on getting bigger until finally a plastic surgeon decided Bob had to go. So the pathology report came back. No MRSA, no bacteria, no extraterrestrial matter, just big old Bob. So we moved on. In fact, we moved all the way to Florida in hopes that year-round golfing and surfing and sports would better regulate my blood sugars. There was a theory that Bob might have been caused by unstable blood sugars, and the rent was half of that in New York. What could go wrong? Here's what. Bob's cousins moved in. Another surgery on my face, and one to remove a pilonidal cyst on my tailbone. And then Bob's cousins hit hard. My thighs and my inner groin. The pain was excruciating, and I was embarrassed to talk about it, as anyone would be when they've got marbles of hellfire in their groin. When my parents would ask me why I was walking funny, I would just say, I took a spill surfing, or I hurt my back, until finally I told my mom. Just for a moment, try to imagine yourself in my shoes when this all started. 3 years ago, in hot, muggy Florida, I would go through an industrial box of Band-Aids every week, desperately trying to cover up the raw skin on my thighs. With every step, the Band-Aid would chafe against it and cause excruciating pain. On top of that, the physical strain that comes from being in constant pain was making me exhausted. I would sleep for 12 to 14 to 16 hours at a time once I finally could fall asleep. So, after 3 more dermatologists, an infectious disease specialist, and another primary doctor, the big day finally came. A new dermatologist shared the diagnosis. Bob and all his cousins were Hidradenitis Suppurativa. That's why I'm here today. I'm here to bring HS out of the shadows. So, what the heck is HS? Well, hidradenitis suppurativa is a very painful, chronic, inflammatory skin disease that's defined by recurrent nodules, tunnels, and scarring. It can form abscesses from the size of peas to baseballs, anywhere where skin meets skin, and other areas too. It is not at all contagious. Bob was my very first HS flare, right there on the top of my head. So, how deep are the shadows where HS has been hiding? Well, I was diagnosed after just 1 year. For unluckier folks, this time in the dark can go on for years. Years of teeth-gritting, grinding, agonizing pain every day and night. Another cruel twist of HS is that it often begins to show symptoms during puberty. So teens hit with HS think it's a sexually transmitted disease and never tell another soul, suffering in silence. The average time it takes for most folks to get a proper diagnosis is over 7 years. Why so long? Well, in some cases, doctors simply aren't familiar with it. They don't connect the dots. They see an abscess here or there as an isolated event. And in other cases, people are, of course, reluctant to seek help. Unlike the ads I did with JDRF and Mary Tyler Moore, this disease is not at all advertised or talked about. One surgeon told my family, there's not a lot of research into it because it's not a sexy disease. The only person of note that I've come across to be even associated with the disease is Karl Marx. He said the painful boils affected his writings, and who could blame him? In a world that is so obsessed with outer beauty, who really wants to talk about painful abscesses in their groin and their underarm? Well, I will. People often say that HS is a rare condition, but it's not rare. It afflicts over 4% of the population, and it's 3 times more common in women than men. Since there are 7 billion people on the planet, that means as many as 230 million people worldwide have HS. Yet, it's rarely discussed or especially studied. Quoting a 2013 NIH report, even though the first reports of the disease go back to the 19th century, both patients and physicians are plagued for an answer, desperate for a definitive treatment. Not only do I want to bring HS out of the shadows, but I also want to help people avoid some of the wrong paths that I've been down. My path is a well-traveled one. I've seen 14 doctors, many of whom prescribe oral antibiotics or steroids, which often lead to more flares and can cause very nasty side effects. Surgery is often the recommended course. I've had 5 surgeries in the past 2 years. But surgery can leave wounds that are slow to heal or literally never heal at all. So you might be thinking, what causes HS? Well, no one knows for sure, but some of the possible causes include heredity, genetics, hormones, environmental toxins, imbalances in the microbiome, and intestinal permeability or leaky gut. As for cures, none yet, but there are theories about everything from antibiotics to immunosuppressants to biologics with very scary long lists of side effects. And HS sufferers, along with myself, have tried everything, and I mean everything. Acupuncture, hyperbaric oxygen treatments, lymphatic therapy, colonics, massage, emu oil. But for me and a lot of other sufferers, painful flares have been minimized, and for some, full remission achieved through dietary changes. In the 2 years since changing my diet, I haven't had a single flare large enough to warrant a surgery. Now, some sufferers exploring diet as a possible solution follow the autoimmune protocol, or the AIP diet. They cut out any grain, any nuts, seeds, legumes, eggs, nightshade vegetables. The list isn't very long of what we can eat. And the other option is to do modified versions of a paleo diet. Yeast can be a very, very big culprit. A 2014 National Institutes of Health report said that all patients put onto a yeast-free diet showed immediate stabilization of their symptoms, and the skin lesions regressed over a 12-month period. When yeast was reintroduced in beer or bread, patients showed an immediate demonstration of skin lesions. Many of us searching for answers found them in a book called The Hidden Plague by Tara Grant. Another 2014 National Institutes of Health report said that Tara's book has led many patients and researchers to look at the role of diet as a possible trigger. Tara's book was a huge lift for me, and I know for a lot of other people. She traveled the exact same circuit that I did, from doctor to doctor, with empathy and answers in very short supply. There are also thousands of posts on a Facebook page called the HS Diet Connection, all about food. It can be incredibly uplifting to see when people have small successes, like reintroducing a food that they haven't had in a very long time, or big ones, like going into remission. But at the same time, it can be heartbreaking when people sneak just a little bite of birthday cake, or they have a slice of pizza, and they suffer with an abscess that can take months or years to heal. I sort of slipped off the wagon sometime 2 years ago and thought I could eat some breakfast burritos from school. I paid with 2 baseball-sized abscesses under each arm, and they really recently just started to heal. I have to say thank you to the saintly souls of the HS Diet Connection page. They aren't selling anything, and they have nothing to gain, but they spend day and night helping folks like me who have been misdiagnosed and misguided. Some people, sadly, can't stand the pain and shame, and they resort to suicide. HS can hit any time from 10 years of age and up. And some people suffer their entire lives. Some people feel isolated, anxious, depressed, unable to engage in any sort of sport, unable to engage in any sort of meaningful relationship. I haven't been swimming or in any open water in 2 years in fear of my wounds getting infected. There's another ironic twist. Moving to sunny South California, the best surf spot in the world, and not being able to surf anymore. It's time to turn this thing around. If you want to help bring HS out of the dark, share my story. Tell a scientist or a researcher. Maybe some bright student would want to tackle this condition. And if you can't remember the 10-syllable name, Hidradenitis Suppurativa, try to remember HS. Tell people about Bob. He was memorable, right? If you or someone that you know has the symptoms, abscesses in the groin, the underarm, the bra line, and the tailbone, tell them that there are online blogs and Facebook pages where people with HS help each other day and night. Tell them that they aren't alone. Remember that statistic? Up to 4% of the population has HS. If there are 300 of you with me today, that means as many as a dozen of you may be suffering along with me. I also invite anyone with HS to share their story. Let's start a conversation. One day, I was at the grocery store, and this little girl came up to me and asked what was wrong with my neck. I could see her mother behind her, eyes widening, starting to panic, right? But I thanked the little girl, and I told her a mini version of HS. The way to get this thing out of the dark is to talk about it. I remember the first time that I met Mary Tyler Moore. We did a public service announcement together called "What Does Hope Look Like?" It was a powerful message that I'll never forget from an unforgettable person. Mary spent decades of her life fighting for her cause, and she never gave up hope. As for HS, what does hope look like? It looks like me and the millions of other people in hiding. It all started with Bob. Let's end with him too. May he serve as a reminder to you all. Thank you. Thank you.